The disturbing footage, captured on hallway and handheld cameras, run through 90 minutes of graphic recordings documenting the alleged assaults where female inmates can be heard crying out in pain.
Yo, why is it a man ripping my clothes off? Why is it a man ripping my clothes off? Why is you grabbing my? Why is you grabbing my?
Resist.
Why is you grabbing my? Why is you grabbing my tree?
At least one other woman also protested the presence of a male officer during a strip search.
This is the brutal reality many women face behind bars. No, the reality is even worse. What we see in leaked footage every so often is only the tip of the iceberg. This shocking and infuriating leaked footage from women's prisons shows us the terrifying reality many female inmates face every single day, and we have to see it to speak up and make sure this doesn't happen again.
We begin with newly released video from the State Attorney General's office of the violent January 12th cell extractions at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women.
It was only in 2021 that the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey came into the spotlight, but the horrors had been going on for years.
Emily Dent did not initially comply.
Come to the door, put your hands up. I got keys. Fine, last call. Come to the door, put your hands up.
An officer appeared to shoot pepper spray into her cell. Video showed her being punched for about a minute while she tried to protect herself.
Reports of brutal beatings and even SA at the hands of the staff had been ignored over and over again.
Why would y'all punch on me like that? For no reason. Like, y'all literally was just punching on me. For what?
So it was a fateful day when someone leaked footage of a prolonged attack carried out by over a dozen prison guards on the poor inmates who had done nothing wrong.
The disturbing footage, captured on hallway and handheld cameras, run through 90 minutes of graphic recordings documenting the alleged assaults where female inmates can be heard crying out in pain.
Watch with caution. It really is graphic.
The girl was sitting there crying and asking them over and over again, why did you punch me in my face? Why did you beat me? Can I have a tissue? Can I have a tissue? They just sat there and stared at it.
The COs at Edna Mahan were nothing short of monsters. They were acting in cahoots, taking pleasure in tormenting the female inmates, and even competing in who could be the most brutal. Thanks to this leaked footage, serious action was taken, but it was 1 minute too late for many of the women who had suffered at their hands for a decade or more.
The incident resulted in serious injuries of the inmates, the arrest of 10 officers with more likely, and the Corrections Commissioner's resignation.
Needless to say, when a video like this reaches the wider public, people begin to speak up.
No one deserves that. Especially a woman. Come on now, like these cops, if you call yourself a man after you just beat the shit out of a woman, you go home and look at your little girl and your wife and you're okay with that? You think your wife is not susceptible to things like that? You think your wife is untouchable for things like that? Or your daughter? Like, where's the humanity in it?
Stating the obvious, but inmates do not belong to correctional officers. They are not objects, and they don't deserve hell on earth because of a past mistake. The incarceration of people who have broken the law is a crucial function in society, aiming to protect public safety, deliver justice, and ideally, facilitate rehabilitation. But the imprisonment itself is the punishment, not an invitation for further abuse or degradation.
When someone gets sentenced, we sentence them to be away from society. We don't then sentence them to being tortured.
Every person, regardless of their past actions or current circumstances, has fundamental human rights that must be respected and protected. The moment we allow these rights to be violated within prison walls, we compromise the very principles of justice and human dignity that our legal system is meant to uphold. It is a grave and disturbing reality that some correctional officers abuse their power, viewing inmates as objects to be controlled or exploited rather than human beings deserving of basic respect. When it leads to SA or other forms of torture, this becomes a huge moral failure and a betrayal of the trust placed in those tasked with maintaining order and safety in correctional facilities. Violating inmates' rights achieves nothing but perpetuating cycles of violence and dehumanization, harming not only the individuals directly involved, but society as a whole. Rashida was one of the victims that day, and after her release, her voice counted toward a serious investigation into the prison.
I've been through many cell extractions, but never have I ever been through one like that. It was horrific. Like I just couldn't believe it. And then I watched a couple of them over trying to figure out what caused this. Like, what did these girls do to cause, this to happen to them? And as I'm watching them, I couldn't see anything, besides them, speaking out of anger, them, scared, not knowing what's going on.
In 2021, the Edna Mahan prison announced it would shut down, but that's a long way ahead, as these plans often take years to finish, and inmates take years to be transferred to other facilities.
They could have saved a lot more lives had they had a different approach, different programming, different culture. That's a beautiful campus.
More than 30 staff members ended up getting disciplinary action. But again, that was just the tip of the iceberg.
The Edna Mahan Women's Facility in Clinton that has been plagued by sexual violence is closing. Governor Murphy announced his intention to shut down the infamous Hunterdon County Prison, the only women's prison in the state, and relocate inmates to a new facility.
And while Edna Mahan Prison was exposed, many other prisons still go undetected, while unspeakable horrors happen inside their walls. Here are more shocking bits of leaked footage from female prison security cameras. On March 14th, 2024, the Washington Correction Center for Women came into the spotlight after a trans female inmate was caught pants down with their cellmate. Amber Faye Fox Kim, born Brian Kim, took the lives of both their parents back in 2006. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in a male prison. In 2021, however, Brian changed his name to Amber and requested a move to a female facility as he now identified as female. So Amber was sent to the Washington Correction Center for Women. 3 years later, she would make headlines as she was caught engaging in not so acceptable acts with her 25-year-old cellmate. This act goes against the prison policies. The only situation where this is allowed is under an approved extended family visit. However, this was small potatoes compared to another similar incident at, you guessed, Edna Mahan Prison. As recently as 2022, in an attempt to adopt a more progressive policy, the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility welcomed 27 trans female inmates in 2022, but one such inmate was Demi Minor. Demi Minor, who caused such a scandal, it restarted discussions about the safety of inmates following the new policy. In April 2022, it was revealed that Demi had left not one, but 2 fellow inmates pregnant, and one of the 2 inmates said the act was not consensual. In situations like this, when one inmate can SA their cellmate, the prison often falls under immense scrutiny, and the policies meant to protect trans inmates are put into question once more. The inmate chose to terminate her pregnancy, but that did nothing to erase the trauma she still has to live with every single day. Again, prison is not a place where torture is allowed. Human rights exist outside and inside prison walls. The aftermath of this troubling incident saw Demi Minor transferred to the Garden State Youth Correctional Facility, a male prison for inmates ages 18 to 30. He was housed in the Vulnerable Housing Unit, which was already home to 3 trans inmates. To this day, Demi claims her own rights were ignored, as she simply had consensual relationships with 2 women, and the guards punished her for her identity. This just goes to show how complex such cases can be, and how they can be politicized to score online points while real people suffer. This next case revolves around an officer being caught doing the worst. CO Terrian Henderson had just been working for 9 months at a Howard County prison when he started hitting on a female inmate who had just been released into a work program. Henderson approached the inmate asking to get to know her, even requesting her phone number. Now, let's make one thing clear before we go on. The power dynamics within correctional facilities create an environment ripe for exploitation, where the line between consent and coercion can become dangerously blurred. Officers hold significant authority over every aspect of an inmate's life, so they can leverage this power to manipulate vulnerable individuals into engaging in relationships or intimate acts that, while not overtly forced, are fundamentally non-consensual. These situations often unfold through subtle pressure, implied threats, or promises of special treatment, making it difficult for inmates to refuse without fear of repercussion. It's crucial to understand that that true consent cannot exist within such a stark imbalance of power. An inmate who acquiesces to an officer's advances or initiates contact under these circumstances is not making a free choice, but rather responding to a complex web of psychological and situational pressures. The absence of physical force or verbal resistance does not equate to consent. These manipulated relationships, whether they involve exchanging phone numbers, engaging in intimate acts, or fostering emotional connections, are inherently abusive. They exploit the inmate's vulnerability and dependence on the officer's goodwill for their safety and well-being within the prison system. Back to this case, Henderson pressured this inmate to get Snapchat as he thought the app's disappearing messages would keep him safe from the prying eyes of the authorities. In other words, he could act with impunity while tormenting this woman in a vulnerable situation. Thankfully, his Snapchat plan wasn't enough to cover his tracks. When an anonymous report came into the Federal Bureau of Prisons, an immediate investigation was launched into Henderson, and it wasn't long before his Snapchat conversations were uncovered by detectives. Here's Henderson leaving the office in a Chevrolet Malibu. An hour later, the same car is seen back at the prison, picking up the inmate. It turns out, Henderson drove her to her job and removed her community corrections bracelet. So while the bracelet showed that she stayed at her workplace from 3:20 p.m. to 8:24 p.m., she was in fact at her home with Henderson, engaging in intimate acts as well as alcohol and narcotics consumption. The following day, the inmate turned herself in for violating her work release contract. She was charged with escape, while Henderson was arrested and questioned about this incident. Initially, he denied everything, but he changed his story multiple times, so the detectives understood very early that he was lying. Plus, all the lying was futile anyway. The authorities had ample CCTV footage to confirm his whereabouts, plus weeks of Snapchat messages and a testimony from the female inmate who was traumatized by the entire experience. He was charged with sexual misconduct by a service provider. The very name of this charge explains the great imbalance in this relationship. He was supposed to be a service provider or a helper. Instead, he abused his position of power to get what he wanted, disrespecting and violating the woman's rights to live a happy life and get a nice, clean start to life after her prison sentence. We turn to the Gloria McDonald facility at the Adult Correctional Institutions in Rhode Island. In 2018, a corrections officer named Collins Umo put the entire institution on the authorities' radar after several disturbing reports came in. 3 inmates testified to Umo sexually assaulting them repeatedly over the course of a year. Between July 2017 and August 2018, one of the brave inmates gave a full testimony hoping to convict this monster, and after her came many more, finding the courage to speak up and the hope that something will be done about this. Each testimony was more terrifying than the other. This criminal was abusing his power to threaten women into submission, treating them like his playthings, and reminding them they did not matter to him. In his eyes, they deserved any form of torment, as they were inmates, scum of the earth. But it's easy to see who was the actual scum of the earth in this situation. Thankfully, Collins Umo was arrested and a lengthy trial followed, with Judge Joseph Montalbano presiding over the case. The evidence against Umo was damning, to say the least. After deliberating for a short time, the judge returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty on 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct. By now, you can see the repeating pattern for yourself. Sexual violence is much more prevalent in women's prisons than in male facilities, but women's life in prison is tougher on many levels. The number of women in U.S. jails has shot up dramatically in recent years. In 1970, there were fewer than 8,000 women in jail. By 2014, that number had exploded to 110,000, a 14-fold increase. This growth far outpaces that of men, which only increased 4-fold in the same time. Most of these women face tough circumstances. Nearly 80% are mothers. Many come from poor backgrounds or communities of color. A lot have struggled with narcotics. When these women go to jail, it causes major disruptions for their families and communities. The system itself often makes things harder for women. Jails use tools to assess inmates' risk levels, but these tools were mostly tested on men. They don't account for the fact that women are generally less likely to commit new crimes. This means women get labeled as higher risk than they really are. It cuts them off from helpful programs in jail. One former inmate wrote, "I got locked up in women's prison when I was 21. When you first get there, they ask if you're addicted to anything. If you said benzos or alcohol, they dosed you up with 4 milligrams of Klonopin a day. There were a few verbal fights, but kind of a camaraderie between the women, like, we're all just addicts trying to get through this together. We had groups, groups, and AA. It was a daily thing for all, which was most except me, the women with children, to break down crying about missing them and how they'd literally anything for their kids now that they're sober. After 2 weeks there, I got moved to the maximum security part. Here you were, in a high-tech building with one bunk in each room and locked in for most of the day, or else you could go in the community room and watch TV a few hours a day. No more access to hot water. Women who didn't pay a fine were locked up with baby killers. They were the most shunned. One baby killer got attacked because she asked for my oatmeal I wasn't eating. No more classes of any kind. You had to be there for over 5 years to be put in the trailers by where the program was. They even had dogs and could go to the library and pick out books instead of just picking from books left behind. I saw a girl almost die getting her face smashed into a metal door frame. Lots of fights. It really was awful. Many women in jail have faced trauma before. A shocking 86% report experiencing SA in their lives. Jail procedures like strip searches or being watched by male guards can be deeply re-traumatizing. Women are also more likely to face SA while in jail. They make up most victims of abuse by jail staff. The same inmate writes about being traumatized by the constant violence and lack of safety while in prison. That really was the worst part, being stuck with all these aggressive people all the time, having no control whatsoever. I remember one time when I first got there, a woman attacked another lady at my table where we were eating. It happened so fast, I was still sitting there when another girl had to pull me up and away from the fight. I saw why soon after, because a different girl who had nothing to do with it, like me, caught a fist right to the face and had a broken eye socket or something. She was rolling on the ground, screaming and crying until she got taken away by the COs to go to medical and then to segregation for fighting. I never saw her or the instigator of the fight again in my time there. It gets even worse. Basic health needs often go unmet for women in jail. Many facilities struggle to provide enough menstrual products, toilet paper, or clean underwear. This issue is so bad that in 2014, the ACLU sued a jail in Michigan over it. Money issues hit women inmates hard too. Women typically earn less than men, making it tougher to afford bail. In 2014, women earned just 79 cents for every dollar men made. For women of color, the gap was even bigger. Probation can be a trap for women. The rules often don't account for childcare needs. This sets women up to fail. Many end up back in jail, not for new crimes, but for missing meetings with officers or failing drug tests. Changes in policing have hurt women too. Crackdowns on minor offenses led to more women being arrested. Jails also charge more fees and fines now. Women, who are more likely to be poor, often can't pay, so they stay locked up longer. Some places are trying to fix these problems. Connecticut started a program that looks at women's specific needs. It's helped lower the number of women who end up back in jail. Philadelphia changed how it handles minor crimes. This has helped many women avoid jail time altogether, but that's just a few places in the US. Before the entire prison system changes to protect women, we need to talk about it more. We need to watch disturbing leaked footage from female prisons, and we need to use it to hold people accountable. Inmates are people too, and they deserve a second chance. Hey, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on female prisons in your country down in the comment section. And before you go, make sure you like and subscribe. See you soon.